Welcome all. I, your host Nazish, welcome you to Divine Decode, where money meets meaning. Today, we are joined by Jennifer Edwards, a certified financial planner with advanced expertise in financial therapy and trauma of money. Founder of Breakthrough Financial Wellness Consulting, Jennifer helps people uncover the deeper psychological, cultural, and emotional forces shaping their financial decisions. Tonight, we explore how understanding these hidden layers can transform stress into confidence and money into a tool for purpose. So, we welcome you, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that is amazing. So, Jennifer, tell me, what inspired you to explore the emotional and psychological side of money rather than just numbers?
I was working as a financial advisor for a nonprofit organization that worked with mid-level age professionals, people who had already finished all of their education and were working we were trying to help them to start off on the right foot. And so we're giving them literacy education as well as a financial advisor to help them through that journey, just kind of starting off with their finances after college or whatever training they had chosen. And in working with hundreds of people across the country from all kinds of different backgrounds, I noticed a pattern emerge among there were different cultural ideas and beliefs that would come up. And then there would be sometimes when, even despite all of my best efforts to explain why a certain concept, financially should work out and why they should feel calm, or, what habit they needed to start and why that was important, there were still some barriers to people being able to do some of those things. And there were oftentimes I would be working with a single individual who was I would be working with the individual and they were in a romantic partnership and the other partner wasn't involved in those meetings. And that created, real difficulty in them reaching their goals and making the changes that they were hoping to achieve. And so I discontinued working for that firm to do some research on this. I just felt like my certified financial planner training didn't prepare me for that experience. And so I was like, we really need to figure this out, why this is happening and what else is going on here for people, because they were given all of the education and accountability support. And not to say that they didn't make tremendous progress. They did. We saw huge gains in overall financial health and financial security. But I did see that sometimes there were aspects of cultural beliefs and relationship dynamics that needed to be addressed, and I just didn't feel entirely prepared.
That is fascinating. So, was there a particular client story that made this insight undeniable? Something like that you would like to share with us?
Sure. I mean, I have lots of them. One of the things that would happen is we would have maybe a bicultural couple. Now, all couples are bicultural. No couple comes from exactly the same culture, but I'm talking about dramatic differences. So a pattern that I saw a lot was maybe two people met while in college, in grad school or something like that. Maybe you had somebody, literal African, like not African American, but somebody from Africa studying in the United States, getting their degree, and they met somebody while in school who was just from America, someone like Midwest Ohio or something like that.
Yeah.
And while they were in school, their financial picture is it's pretty bare bones. I mean, you're barely getting by. You get little stipends for teaching. You're hopefully just maybe living on some loans, or maybe you have enough income coming in from some of your teaching to cover your educational expenses. But there's not a whole lot of there's not a lot going on that would create a lot of conflict or that you'd have to make a lot of decisions around. You're just kind of getting through school, right? So if the partnership was created in those circumstances when there wasn't a whole lot of financial decisions to be made, then what would happen after they finished school is all of these cultural differences would start to emerge and come up, didn't really know what they meant and how tied to their identities they were. And they would maybe mislabel them as being like character flaws, or, there's something maybe wrong with our partnership and the relationship itself. Uh, you know, Instead of going, hey, we both have very different money stories and very different ways that our families would have talked about money and thought about money and the ideas that would have been around it. And so it's really not so much about, okay, you're thinking about this wrong and I'm thinking about this correctly. It's just two very different ways of looking at it. And to navigate that requires some special care.
It does require special care, and money plays a role in everybody's life at a different level. So how even the most financially prepared individual can feel trapped by invisible forces shaping their choices, it's real. So you have a 7-layered financial wellness framework that digs into family stories, cultural expectations, and psychological responses. Which layer do you find most surprising to client when they first uncover it?
I think one of the things that surprises people is my acknowledgement of the societal layer.
Yeah.
Because especially in the United States, most people's the financial narrative and cultural idea here is that your financial problems are largely your responsibility, they're your fault, that if you got into credit card debt, almost the whole onus of that situation is on the borrower themselves. Instead of looking at the entire structural layer and the forces that were involved in this, I have a personal story about this that I explore with
Please
people. So
share.
when I went away to college, I was just barely, and in fact, first week of my college experience, I was 17 years old. So I turned 18 just like right after I went away to school. And this was before there was a 2009 credit card act. And this was back when they've changed it. So it shows that like this was an unethical an unethical thing to do, was to offer all these free incentives. So you could get, back then it was CDs, like musical CDs and T-shirts and hats and gift cards and things like that for taking out credit cards. And I didn't know anything about credit cards. This is before the internet, before cell phones, before you could just like Google, hey, what is going on here? And my family didn't really leave me with a whole lot of financial literacy. So I was just thinking, oh, cool, free stuff. Like what college student doesn't want free stuff, right? So I was just signing right and left, like all these credit card offers and just getting all these cards coming in and enjoying all my freebies. And then not understanding how credit cards worked, how the interest was charged. You see this card, and back then it would have been just a little bit of money. It would have been maybe $100 credit limit or $250 credit limit. So I couldn't get into too much debt with it. But if you charge that to the max and then you take a while paying it off, you might spend $300 on $250 worth of purchases. And I didn't have extra money for that kind of thing, but I didn't understand what it meant or what it looked like. And I just thought, oh, somebody thinks that I'm special and can give me $250 of extra money and there's no consequences to any of this. And the fact that they have changed that law shows that somebody has said, wait a minute, you're responsible for a lot of this. And it torched my credit for a while, taking out all of those credit card offers. And I did end up getting into credit card debt over my head. And so I had interest charges that, increased the cost of the goods that I had purchased. And I learned a good lesson, about how these companies that it made it seem like they were on my side, right? We're going to offer you all of this opportunity when really that's not their plan. Their plan is to make money off of, the fees and the interest, and they expect people to get into credit card debt. That's why they charge such high interest rates, is they don't expect you to be able to pay it back. So, that's just one of those structural changes when I say, hey, for instance, if you're a person of color or an immigrant in the United States, you've got some extra hurdles. So when you come to me and you say, I've got financial troubles, I say, well, just so we can acknowledge there's more to this than just your own personal choices. And the two factors, so my 7-layer framework has societal So that's the systemic factors that are involved. And then relational. So that's, if you've got a spouse that doesn't want to save and you want to save,
Yeah.
you've got to navigate that. Or if you've got a family that expects communal resource sharing, like, what's mine is yours and yours is mine. And when I have an emergency, your financial resources should be available to my emergency and vice versa. Those are just examples of relational dynamics that might impact your ability to be successful with money. And when I say successful with money, I mean as the dominant economic culture in the US defines it, which you might decide you don't want to define it that way. You might decide that you want to define it in a different way that is more in alignment with the value system in your family or just something else that you've learned and decided to take on. After that is the educational component. So that's where the literacy comes in. You do have to have the knowledge, but that's one of the factors that most people think that, well, that's the problem, is you don't know enough. But there's more than that even before we get to educational. And after that is behavioral. That's where your financial habits come into play, where the self-discipline does play a role. And that's the other one that most people say, those are where your financial problems lie, is in either you don't have the education or you don't have the self-discipline. And what I'm saying is there's a lot more to it than that. Those are two of them. Those are important, but there's a lot more than just those two. After the behavioral is the physiological. So we do have to think about how our bodies are. The classic example in this one is don't go shopping when you're hungry. Don't go to the grocery store when you haven't had dinner yet. And, you need to make all of those choices in a space that is not designed for you to make good choices, about whether, what to buy in terms of your nutrition as well as how much to spend. So sleep, diet, exercise, all those things do affect your ability to be successful with money. And then it's the psychological level. And that's where there's getting a lot more attention about that. The stories that we're telling ourselves, the narrative that came into our adult lives from our childhood, that's all in those psychological levels. And below that is actually, it's subatomic. It's literally like energy, the way that our nervous system has evolved to react to the trauma. We might be activated when we sit down to look at our bills, or when we sit down to form a budget, or we might have a neurological activation during a shopping experience that might make us either overspend or even be too nervous to spend money. So we might have, both sides of the spectrum there. And that all comes along from, our experiences through time.
This is so insightful. Like, money isn't just math, it is mirror reflecting our inner world. So, like, many couples fight over finances despite good intention. How do you help them get over these conflict and move into from conflict to collaboration?
That is so important. Such a great question. What we start with at Breakthrough Financial Wellness is always to start with understanding. So we explore both persons' narratives, their history growing up, what money symbolizes to them. So you might have somebody who they think, oh, my partner overspends, but there might be something wrapped up in their identity where that's part of their self-worth, is to have, name brand clothing and expensive hotels when they go on vacations. And maybe their family growing up, there was a lot of denial, there was a lot of scarcity, and this is how they are now expressing that they have value as a human being. So we first explore it, and then we start to say, okay, what in these values and beliefs do we consciously want to keep going forward? And saying, okay, just because this belief system got into my psyche and helped me start making decisions, and we can even thank it. I encourage my clients to thank their inner child and say, thank you for coming up with that belief system that helped me get through the time and survive until where I am now. And it has served its purpose. And now we can decide whether or not we want to maintain that belief system, change it. We could even decide that doesn't serve us anymore. So a lot of times conflict will resolve a lot through just the understanding, and both people can come and go, oh, I get why maybe why I do so much sports betting, or maybe why I spend so much on shoes and handbags, or why I tend toward not really wanting to tell my boss how valuable I am. And so I'm under earning, those kinds of things. And then we can start to make some changes. And then the other thing, this is part of the technical side and being a planner as well, is it's like, well, maybe you are saving enough or maybe you aren't saving enough. At least we can weigh in on that and say, if you want to retire comfortably, you do need to increase your saving. If one person is advocating for a higher savings rate, we can weigh in on that as well.
So you did mention that we can make some changes and things like that. So are there some exercise or conversation that immediately start to create trust around money, something like that?
So I really love the idea of just coming into mindfulness around
Okay.
money. So, and I think this really aligns with what your listeners want to do, is to awaken their higher self and live on purpose, right? And to start to uncover that wisdom, that comes through being really conscious about things. So one of the things you can do, and you have to do it at home when you're not being faced with a financial decision, is you come to consciousness. So you really uh, start with the breath work, coming into that where your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system meet, so you can become embodied. And then you can think about financial decision that you might face in the future, and then try to bring your higher self into that situation. So if it's like, I'm going to, maybe my habit has been that I spend $7 on a coffee on the way to work every day. And that adding itself up over time is really keeping me from being able to reach another goal. And I could make coffee at home and take it with me. And I could even spend expensive coffee and make it at home and still not spend that money. What does that symbolize to me? Okay, well, I want to have an expensive coffee when I walk into work. It makes me look important. It makes me look like I'm, got everything together and that I'm kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that symbolize to us? Can we get that feeling some other way? And that mindfulness will start to be like, okay, start to meditate. You can even write down some mantras, some new statements that you want to have, put those on a voice recorder and have that come in. They say that it takes 20 minutes of a new idea every day for about a month
Yeah.
for your subconscious to
Mhm.
replace that belief system. So, because the way that we learn in our conscious mind is the cognitive way, where we study and we learn some new information and we try to integrate it, and maybe we have a kinesthetic experience and an auditory experience and a visual experience, and that helps us learn it. But to change our subconscious beliefs is really through repetition. And we had that repetition going on when we were children. We were in those messages and we were
Yeah,
hearing that same thing come across. And so to replace it, we have to give our subconscious a lot of exposure to the new idea.
exactly. This is so relatable. Money can offer trigger emotions that we are not aware about, some settled emotions that we are completely unaware. So money often triggers such emotions, and learning to navigate through them is the key to harmony. So
Mhm.
from whatever you have told our listeners and to us, it really makes it easier for us to understand how to navigate through it and to actually just go to harmony. So tell me one thing, how can professionals like advisors or coaches integrate financial empathy into their work without losing their technical accuracy?
Well, there's absolutely no reason to lose any of the technical skill to be
Mhm.
able to open up this side. It's an additional skill. It's something that is definitely required in practice. So one of the ways that you do it, first, you have to start learning about it. You have to start saying, okay, realizing that your clients or whoever it is you're working with, that their financial lives are much deeper than just those behaviors, just those, the ways that they're interacting with you. There's deeper levels than this. And one of the ways to acknowledge with them, say, hey, you know what? I can see that. Well, the very first thing to do is, whenever you're working with a client, is to handle the initial problem that is coming in. Now that's usually a technical thing. Maybe there's a specific question, like sometimes it's our parents just got somebody's parent just died and we got an inheritance, right? So dealing with what to do with that extra money, making sure that it's working toward people's goals, get them through that. So I suggest that you don't start this kind of work until you have solved that initial problem and they feel very secure with you, they trust you, they know you, and then they're going to be more willing to open up about these other aspects of their financial lives. So you would then maybe say something like, "Hey, how do you feel about where we are right now? And have we dealt with that? Remember when you first came in and we were dealing with this new influx of money or this problem or that problem, whatever it was, and now do we feel, on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed do we feel about that? Oh, we feel pretty resolved about that. That feels good right now. Say, okay, I just wanted to take this time that now we feel a little bit more settled to do a little bit of exploration because we know now we can say this. We know that money is more than math. We know that it's much more than just the actual numbers about where you are financially that makes you feel secure. And as a coach or as an advisor, I'm interested in not just having you be financially independent, although that's part of it and that's helpful. I want you to be secure and well and confident around money, and to also have a relationship where you can both talk about your experience with money openly. You can talk with me about anything that you feel like you need to address when it comes to money. And so I just wanted to start with, can first of all, are we okay doing that? How would you feel about doing that? And acknowledging that it's scary and that it's a taboo subject and that it's very normal to feel nervous about exploring. So normalizing all of those emotions, saying there's going to be a bunch of stuff that comes up that you might not have explored in the past, but I want to assure you that this is a safe space for you to do that. And then helping them envision that in the future, they're going to be like, I there's something in your relationship that you're not talking about. And how would it feel to not have that burden anymore? And then, it's going to take us some time, but we can get there.
Creating a safe space is very important for people to open up and to share. It's completely mandatory. So, do you find that combining empathy with strategy leads to a better outcome for clients?
I do, but sometimes I find that what happens is that they actually do a little bit of introspection for a time and the money thing might persist. So let's say it's overspending or it's gambling or something like that. As we're exploring why this is coming up or how come this is happening, they might still do that thing, but now they understand it and they can start to do it consciously. But in the end, it really does help to say, okay, if we can take away that neurological stimulation, that trauma response that we have, then yeah, they're going to be able to budget better. They're going to be able to get out of their debt. They're going to look at it. They're going to say, oh, this isn't actually reflective of my value, where I am in my net worth journey. And that even though we've been getting this message from culture that says, that the higher your net worth, the more important you are. And then we're exploring and going, that's actually not true. That's a pretty big lie. Our value as humans is infinite. Our truer higher self, you cannot put a value on it. It is not have anything to do with dollars and cents, and that you can start to make those decisions consciously. I have had clients who have decided after doing some of this work to leave really high-paying, high-stress jobs and focus more on what makes them happy, what brings them peace, what's maybe better for their relationships, gives them more time with money. So it might actually be taking a step backwards financially. It might be like, okay, instead of, gunning for the six-figure salary, I'm going to be okay with something a little bit lower, but my day-to-day life is going to be richer and fuller, and my long-term prospects for relationship health are going to be better, which I think that's financially well. That's wellness. That's not just, okay, we're just accumulating as many assets as we can. That's not really my goal.
That is very good. This balance is very powerful, showing that the heart and the head can guide financial decisions together. It's very important. So, for our listeners who are ready to feel confident with money today, what is one practical yet transformative step that they can take immediately? What would you suggest?
Well, the first one I would say is to look at those 7 layers. So rewind and listen to them and say, where does my hang up lie? Is it in society is making it very difficult and giving me a lot of impediments to progress? And sitting back and acknowledging that, maybe you're writing some things down, you're at least saying to yourself, okay, where I'm at isn't entirely my fault. But then the next layer is to say that this still falls under the purview of my responsibility. So I like to use the analogy of let's say you are a family and you own a home and an arsonist comes and burns down your house.
Yeah.
I would say, whose fault is it that your family doesn't have a place to live that night?
It could be the arsonist fault.
The arsonist's fault. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the arsonist's fault that your family doesn't have a place to stay that night, right?
Yeah.
But whose responsibility is it to ensure that your family has shelter that night?
The elders in the family.
It's yours. It's yours,
Yeah.
right? You know, if you're the family, if you're the caregiver,
Yeah.
yeah,
The caregiver's responsibility. Yeah.
it's the caregiver's responsibility to ensure that their
Exactly.
family has. And so we can acknowledge a lot of these things and we can say, this is how life works. Sometimes those for whom it's not their fault, it is still their responsibility to take care of things going forward.
Yeah.
So we say, it's okay if you're a person of color and you have these impediments, or if you have these different cultural ideas that your family, those are just things that make us stronger, that can generate character building, that can also make us closer in our coupleship to have some extra challenges that that can really bring us closer and help us understand each other better. So I would say go through that list and figure out, where does your problem lie? If it really is knowledge, go out and get the knowledge. Attack the correct problem with the correct solution. If it is a new habit that you need to form, then learn some habit building skills. But if it's a trauma response that you're getting to some kind of a financial, some part of your financial life, then you need to deal it with trauma therapy. You need to look at it from, okay, mindfulness. You need to be able to say, okay, because with trauma, the past is the present. So the most important step is removing yourself from continuing trauma. Maybe that's where you have to start. If it is your neurological, if it is your psychological stories, if it's the belief system you think is hampering you, that exploration and opening those up. So I would say, first look at which layer it falls under, and then say, okay, in light of the fact that this is where I need to start, I'm going to use this solution to address it. It's kind of like opening a ketchup bottle with a sledgehammer. I mean, just don't use the wrong tool for the problem. Or you might create.
Yeah, self-reflection is very important. To know what you are going through is the only way to deal with it. So that is very empowering what you are saying, and the actions plus awareness creates financial well-being that lasts. Completely agree. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. And it was a very amazing session with you. What an enlightening conversation with Jennifer Edwards, reminding us that money isn't just a resource, but reflection of our mindset, habits, and history. If today's episode resonated, that a moment to reflect on one financial belief you hold and ask, does this serve my peace, purpose, and growth? One small shift today can transform your financial confidence tomorrow.